Hey guys, welcome back. Thanks for tuning in. I've got something a little different, a little off the beaten track for you today. I've been showing a few kind of Canadian reggae and soul things in a few videos recently, and a few people have been kind of surprised to see that kind of thing coming out of Canada. So I thought I would show you guys what I've got in terms of records and kind of give you all a bit of history, a bit of a rundown of what came out in previous decades. And it's by no means complete. I don't have everything. There's stuff I don't have I'm not going to show. I'm not going to get into singles to any great degree, but I'm just going to kind of give you a bit of an overview in terms of significant stuff that came out. So as far as Jamaican music in Canada, kind of the 60s is where it started to get its foothold. You would see a big influx of Jamaican immigrants, mainly to the Toronto area, basically trying to seek a better life, better economic opportunities, possibly joining family that were already here. Canada and Jamaica had kind of a common British heritage, colonial heritage, which made it sort of a appealing destination. And Toronto actually would become the #3 reggae capital of the world outside of Jamaica after the UK, London area, and New York. And that is because of the large concentration of Jamaican and West Indian population. Now, as far as Canadian reggae, the most comprehensive reissue or overview program that has come out so far has been done through Light in the Attic Records. They did a series of releases called Jamaica to Toronto, focusing on just this very scene, this diaspora of Jamaican immigrants that came to Canada and started creating their own music here. It's compiled by a friend of mine, Kevin Howes. His DJ name is Cipriano. He lives not too far away from me. A lot of the records I get that I show in my videos are from him. But starting in 2006, he started this Jamaica to Toronto series, compiled all the releases, wrote all the liner notes, did all the research, and it's the most crucial resource for Canadian reggae out there. And it kind of kicked off with this one. I don't have this on vinyl yet. I think I might have showed this before. This is Wayne McGee and the Sounds of Joy. This is the original vinyl release of this was very rare. Wayne McGee was a Jamaican-Canadian guitarist and vocalist. And this album is a mix of reggae, very early reggae. I think this is like, this is released in 1970 originally. But also funk, R&B. The early scene, they kind of had to mix up styles and be flexible. There was no reggae scene in Canada to speak of, and reggae itself was a pretty new development in Jamaica. So this was the original vinyl release of this. Most of the stock was destroyed in a warehouse fire. So the original LP is crazy expensive. I've heard of it going in the high hundreds of dollars. So this was the first Light in the Attic reissue. And the series was kicked off properly with, and I have all of these on vinyl and CD. I'll show you both. Most of my vinyls are sealed. I got them cheap a few years ago, and I've just kept them that way for the time being. Jamaica to Toronto, Soul, Funk, and Reggae. This is kind of the inaugural release in the series. And I'll show you the CD here. Just to give you an idea of the liner notes in here. It's like a book, which gives you all the history, all the artists and the releases that came out. And again, it's not purely reggae. The scene was kind of integrated in terms of rock and R&B, and these guys would all kind of play together and mix up different styles. So you have early kind of arrivals in Canada like Jackie Mittoo, the great keyboard player from Jamaica, legendary Studio One keyboardist and session arranger. Other guys, Jojo Bennett, Lloyd Delprat, who are more established here. Wayne McGee is on here. You have the Hitchhikers featuring the Mighty Pope, real name Earl Hedrum. Here he is right here. This is his second album, I think. The debut is His debut album from 1977, I believe it was the first major label release by a black artist in Canada. And he's more soul, bit of R&B and disco. My friend Kevin is actually very close friends with him. I mentioned Jackie Matu. This was reissued on Light in the Attic as part of that series as well. This is actually an original on the Summus label. This is Wishbone. This was perhaps the first reggae album released in Canada. But again, it's not purely reggae. There's a lot of funk on here, some soul, kind of pop, I guess you'd say. It kind of spared no expense in the packaging there. And he went on to do a couple more albums during his sojourn in Canada. Let's put it all together. These ones released on United Artists through the Canadian Talent label. Cover of the stylistic song on there. And again, mix of kind of poppy, keyboard-driven instrumentals and reggae and soul. Reggae Magic. That's one's on Pickwick. Another Jamaican luminary that arrived in Toronto and spent a number of years here. Leroy Sibbles. Released a number of albums in Canada. This is Strictly Roots from 1980 on the Micron label. Leroy Sibbles was the lead singer of the Heptones. For Studio One, they recorded the classic Party Time LP, Night Food in the 70s, prior to Leroy's relocation to Canada. Put out the Now album about the same time. That one's on Generation label. Actually have two Canadian pressings of that same album, totally different covers. Now. Leroy Sibbles was not only a fabulous Jamaican singer, one of the best, he was also, in his spare time, he picked up the bass at Studio One and laid down a lot of the bass lines for the classic rhythm tracks that became the Studio One trademark and would get redone and versioned over and over again right up to today. Another one here on top. Leroy Sibbles spent a number of years in Canada. He considers it one of the worst decisions he's made because he was out of the loop as far as reggae was concerned, and it was tough to make a going career out of reggae in Canada at that time. But we love you anyway, Leroy. And continuing on with the Light in the Attic series, as we get into the 70s, you had some major producers start to arise that would create proper reggae that wasn't interested in crossing over into R&B or the pop markets, but reggae that would compete with what was coming out of Jamaica at the time. And probably the major one was Jerry Brown's Summer Records label, which is nicely anthologized on the Light in the Attic release, Summer Records Anthology, 74 to 88. Those were the years the Summer Records label was operational. Jerry Brown was another Jamaican transplant. He bought a suburban house in Malton, which is a suburb of Toronto, to convert into his studio. He worked a 9-to-5 as an auto body laborer. And soon all the Jamaican music scene people would start coming through. You had Johnny Osborne, who was not really a big name at that time. He had cut a couple of albums in Jamaica, kind of the tail end of the 60s, early 70s, before arriving in Canada. When he went back to Jamaica in the late 70s, early 80s, he would become a major star in the 80s, recording a classic album for Studio One, as well as countless hits for other labels. Now these Summer Records, I'm going to show you the CD here. Again, massive booklet full of detailed information here. Look at that. And it's also cool because the CD, one side is a CD, and on the other side there's a short documentary film that they found with rare studio footage of the Summer Records studio, Jackie Matu doing his thing. If I can find that on the web, I'll put a link in the comments down below for you guys to check out. Summer Records they managed, the first full-length LP they put out was kind of their house band, Earth, Roots and Water, Innocent Youths. These guys kind of had a bit of a floating membership. The band opened for the Police in Toronto and gave them that copy of that LP to take back to England. The second full-length LP that Summer Records put out was by Noel Ellis, self-titled. I think this one is 1983 this came out. Noel was the son of Alton Ellis, who had spent some time in Canada and was actually on that Wayne McGee album, I think playing percussion or something. That's him right in the middle there, Alton Ellis. Great Jamaican singer from the 60s rocksteady days. This one's sort of tangentially Canadian. It's partly recorded in Canada. This is Willie Williams, Messenger Man. This is a reissue on the classic Blood and Fire label, which came out in 2005. The original LP would be about early 80s, I guess. But Willie Williams was a Jamaican singer who, again, passed through Toronto. And he had recorded a song on the Real Rock rhythm, which is a rhythm track that originated at Studio One. I believe Leroy Sibbles again laid down the bass line on that one. So he came and did a new vocal on that rhythm track called Armageddon Time, which came out on the Studio One label. And The Clash later picked up on that and did a cover version. Now Willie went back to Toronto and cut a new version of that song called Rocking Universally and got Noel Ellis to voice on it, which was kind of one of his major hits. Now, Jerry Brown had started the Summer Records label with a partner called Oswald Creary, who is kind of a mysterious figure in Canadian reggae music. He and Jerry Brown had a parting of the ways. Prince Jammy, I talked a little bit about him last video, I think. He had spent some time in Canada too. He wasn't well known at that time, but he had actually wired up the Summer Records studio equipment, and his arrival on the scene kind of caused a bit of friction between Jerry Brown and Oswald Creary. Oswald left and went solo and started his own label called Half Moon. Put out some very crucial songs by various artists with his house band, the Super 8 Corporation. I think he only put out one LP by Stranger Cole, which I showed him a video or two back, a different album. And there's a compilation out called Glory, Dominion, Majesty, Power on the PK label, which is a compilation of Half Moon productions. Black on one side, white on the other. And Stranger Cole is on here, Joe Higgs, Super 8 Corporation, Johnny Osborne's got a song on here, Leroy Sibbles is on here. That one's not really any liner notes in that one, so a bit of a missed opportunity as well as far as putting any information out there. But not too much really known about Oswald Creary as far as I know. He's still around, but haven't really seen any interviews or any kind of comments from him. So that's kind of the two main producers that were creating reggae in a very authentic Jamaican sound. And it was a tough go for these guys trying to put their records out in the Canadian marketplace. Buyers at that time would want records coming out of Jamaica. So Jerry Brown would actually put Made in Jamaica on his 45-inch or 7-inch 45 singles to try and fool the public. But listening to those records, you can't tell they're made in Canada. They sound like things created in Jamaica. The third kind of major producer, another Jamaican transplant, was Everett Cooper, better known as King Culture. This is the only LP I have from him. This is King Culture in Cultural Mood. This is a dub album that is mainly instrumental remixes of tracks that he laid down with vocalists, basically stripped down to focus on drum and bass. And this is kind of in the King Tubby mixing style, in that he's got some echo and reverb and bits of vocals floating in and out of the mix. Very this stands up with any of the Jamaican dub albums of the time as far as I'm concerned. Everett Cooper's still around on the scene. I've seen him on Facebook. You can friend him up. But his back catalog is fairly elusive, has never been anthologized or reissued to my knowledge. I talked a bit about Johnny Osborne. When he arrived in Canada, he joined a group called Aishan People. This is the first of their 2 albums. He isn't on this one. He is on this album, which is just self-titled. And these guys are very authentic roots reggae group out of Toronto. Those 2 albums were produced by David Clayton Thomas of Blood, Sweat and Tears, who's a Canadian. And he really took them under his wing and championed them. After the breakup of that group, Johnny went back to Jamaica and became a major star in the 80s. I showed this a few videos back. I'm going to show it again. It was kind of a crucial find for me in terms of the history that it opened up. Crack of Dawn. This is not reggae, it's R&B, funk, soul. This was actually the first release on a major label by a black group in Canada. And I talked a bit about this before, just kind of the fulcrum of the group is 2 brothers, Karl Harvey and Rupert Harvey, with Glenn Ricketts on vocals. He's gone on to become a long-running veteran solo reggae artist. Now, Karl Harvey went back to Jamaica back and forth and was playing with Bunny Lee's Aggravators band. Appears on a number of dub albums there. In the early 80s, he joined Toots and the Maytals band, which has remained in that position ever since, as well as having various other projects on the go. Now, his brother Rupert, following Crack of Dawn, put out 2 albums under the name OGG. This one is called The Shadow. This is from 1979 on Ultra Records. And then he followed it up with one called Halfway Home from 1980, also on Ultra. Now, these aren't purely reggae. They're kind of a fusion-y mix of reggae with jazz and some kind of progressive rock, a bit of funk in there. Following those 2 albums, Rupert helped found a group called Messenger in the Toronto area. This is their debut. Very authentic reggae, roots reggae album. They would be active through the 80s and 90s, and I think they've gotten back together more recently, with Karl Harvey also in the fold. This is a later one from 87, a bit more of a pop sound on here. Karl also contributing. I got this one, 20th Century Rebels, another Toronto group. It's more of an EP here, 5 songs on it. This was formed by one of the members of that Earth, Roots and Water group that I showed before. Cali and Dub Inc. This is later 80s. Another Toronto, or actually Montreal he's from. Canada also has Dub Poetry, Lillian Allen, Revolutionary Tea Party. This is from 1986. This was a Juno Award-winning album. That's Canada's version of the Grammys. Best Reggae Album. She's kind of a female, very, very political, very feminist dub poet, which is a dub poet is somebody that kind of talks lyrics in a thick Jamaican patois over heavy roots reggae rhythms. If you know Linton Kwesi Johnson in the UK, she's kind of Canada's answer to him, but very, very feminist, very political. Last one I think I'm going to show you today. I actually found this one in a thrift store, sealed quite a few years ago. I was listening to it the other day. Phase 4. These guys were a bunch of young kids, if you can see that. I think they were pretty much high school kids that got together. Looks like 2 sets of brothers in there and a few friends. And they would play gigs around here and there. This is the only record they ever put out that I've heard of. Came on the Tangent label. And this is a 12-inch single. They've got one original song called Hard Luck Man with a dub version, instrumental. And side 2, they have a almost 7-minute version of Bob Marley's Redemption song. which I listened to this the other day. I sort of remember the original song being just okay, not really that great, but when I listened to it, it sounded really good. They sound older than their years. But the version of Redemption Song on there is very, very sublime, very, very reverent. These kids obviously had taken Bob's message to heart and his music, and were doing their own thing in Toronto, which I think would have pleased him very much, to see young kids that far away from Jamaica picking up on his musical message. And this one was from 1982, I believe this came out, so he's just shortly died. So that's about it for now, guys. I'm gonna leave it there. Once you get into the later 80s and the 90s, of course, you get the two-tone and the revivals of the ska sound, and various other groups start springing up all over Canada. But I'm going to stick with that focus, and that's what I've got for you today. Hope you enjoyed this bit of history lesson, and cheers!